Good morning, my students. Our lesson today is a story, The Secret Garden, Chapter 8, Part 2, the last part of the story. Review. What other traveler think of Mr. Craven? Other traveler thought that Mr. Craven was a half madman or a man who couldn't forget a terrible crime. The servants were confused about the health of Colin. Why? Because he's getting better, it's true, but sometimes, some days he eats nothing at all, and other days he eats just like a healthy boy. He used to scream even at the idea of fresh air, but he spends all his time outside in his wheelchair with Miss Mary and Deacon Sorby. He's in the garden at the moment. When Mr. Craven went back to Yorkshire to the house, Colin was in the garden. Okay, so Mr. Craven went to the garden. Those were the words of the dream. He hurried out of the house and towards the place which he had not visited for so long. He found the door with the climbing plants over it, and he stood outside listening for a moment. Okay, he stood outside the secret garden, and the door was open. Surely I can hear voices inside the garden, he thought. Aren't there children whispering, laughing, running in there, or am I going mad? He was asking himself. He heard the voices of the children inside, and he was asking himself, okay? And then the moment came when the children couldn't stay quiet. There was a wild laughing and shouting, and the door was thrown open. A boy ran out, a tall, healthy, handsome boy. Of course, it was Colin. Straight into the man's arms. He ran into the arms of his father, Mr. Craven. Mr. Craven stared into the boy's loving eyes. Who? What? Who? He cried. Colin hadn't planned to meet his father like this, but perhaps this was the best way to come running out with his cousin and his friend. Father, he said, I'm Colin. You can't believe it? I can't believe it myself. It was the garden and Mary and Deacon that made me well. We've kept it a secret up to now. Aren't you happy, Father? I'm going to live forever and ever and ever. Colin told his father that it was the garden, Mary and Deacon who helped him to become healthy again. Mr. Craven put his hands on the boy's shoulders for a moment. He couldn't speak. Take me into the garden, my boy, he said at last, and tell me all about it. And in the secret garden, where the roses were at their best and the butterflies were flying from flower to flower. Okay. In this page, the servants were confused about the health of Colin. Why? Because he sometimes eats, other times he doesn't eat. And he screams with no reason. Sometimes he is calm. When Mr. Craven came back, Colin was in the garden with Mary and Deacon. So Mr. Craven went there. He listened from outside, then he went inside, and Colin ran into his arms. And he told him that the garden, Mary, and Deacon helped him to become better. Okay. Answer the following. Where was Colin when Mr. Craven came home? He was in the garden. What did Colin do when he saw his father in the garden? Colin ran into his father's arms, and Mr. Craven couldn't believe it. The children told Mr. Craven about their story. They told him everything. Sometimes he cried. Sometimes he laughed and he was very happy. And at last, Mr. Craven told them that the garden wasn't a secret anymore. Colin said that he would never use a wheelchair anymore. And they went together to the house. Colin walking side by side to his father, and all the servants had the greatest shock when they saw Colin walking with his father without the wheelchair. And that was the end of the story. Answer the following. What did the children tell Mr. Craven? They told him their story. Why were the servants shocked? Because they saw Colin walking with his father without his wheelchair. Thank you for listening to the story, and it's time for the assessment. Okay, I want you to answer these two questions. Where was Colin when Mr. Craven came home? What did Colin do when he saw his father in the garden? We come to the end of our session. Thank you for watching and see you next time, inshallah.